In the 17 seconds it takes for an astropathic scream to cross 3 star systems, 47 billion souls can die. Astropath Tertius Morvek learned this truth as psychic agony flooded his withered mind, carrying with it the final thoughts of an entire civilization being devoured by something that should not have possessed the intelligence to coordinate its own hunger. The message that burned through his consciousness defied every tactical doctrine the Imperium had developed over 10 millennia of Xenos warfare. Waaagh! Skarjaw has learned to think. The impossible had happened. An Ork warlord had transcended the brutish limitations of his species, transforming mindless green violence into something far more terrifying, organized destruction guided by genuine strategic intelligence. If you hunger for more tales where humanity faces the unthinkable in the grim darkness of the far future, hit that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who stand vigil with us in these darkest hours. Lord General Khazanix stared at the tactical display in the marble halls of Mordian Sector Command, watching red icons blink out across the hololith like dying stars. First, Verdania Prime, its 3 billion agricultural workers silenced mid-harvest. Then the mining stations of the Herakles belt, their distress calls cut short by static that spoke of total annihilation. Finally, the fortress world of Kaelor's outer defenses, whose planetary defense grid had been designed to withstand siege warfare, gone dark without explanation. "Sir," reported Major Voss, his voice carrying the strain of an officer who had spent 30 years believing he understood the nature of their enemies. "Long-range augurs confirm Ork fleet elements numbering in the thousands. Ground force estimates." He paused, double-checking data that seemed to mock every principle of Xeno's limitations. Conservative projections placed their strength at 40 million combatants, possibly much higher. The numbers were staggering, but what chilled Khazanix's blood was not the quantity, but the quality of intelligence flooding in from the few survivors who had escaped the Green Tide's advance. Reports spoke of Ork formations maintaining tactical spacing, coordinated artillery barrages, and most disturbing of all, discipline. The aliens were following actual battle plans that extended beyond the immediate slaughter. Warboss Skarjaw had done the impossible. He had imposed order on chaos itself, uniting dozens of warring tribes under strategic thinking that approached human levels of sophistication. Intelligence archives contained no precedent for such development, no tactical doctrine for countering an enemy that combined Ork physical advantages with genuine military intelligence. "Deploy the 47th Mordian Iron Guard to Kaelor Prime," Khazanix commanded, the weight of 17 star systems pressing down on his shoulders like a funeral shroud. Full regimental strength, they are to establish defensive positions and hold at all costs. The order rippled through Sector Command with the terrible inevitability of a death sentence. Within hours, 100,000 of Mordian's finest were boarding transport vessels, their crimson dress uniforms exchanged for battlefield grey, their ceremonial weapons loaded with killing intent. Colonel Marcus Thorne watched from the bridge of the transport Vanguard's Pride as his regiment prepared for what might be their final campaign. The Iron Guard represented everything noble about Imperial military tradition. Soldiers forged in the endless night of their tidally locked homeworld, where discipline meant the difference between civilization and chaos. Each man could execute the 67 standard battle formations blindfolded, strip his lasgun in complete darkness, and would rather die than retreat without orders. They were the Emperor's chosen, products of a society that understood order as the only barrier against the void. But as their transport ships entered the warp, Colonel Thorne reviewed intelligence reports that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. Skarjaw's boys displayed coordination that violated the fundamental nature of Ork psychology, their ramshackle vehicles showing crude but effective tactical modifications, and most unsettling of all, Construction projects on conquered worlds suggested they were building something permanent rather than pursuing typical hit-and-run raids. The Emperor's Tarot had been consulted, revealing cards that spoke of fundamental change, the broken world, the beast ascendant, and most ominous of all, the Emperor's judgment. Whether that judgment would favor humanity or condemn it remained to be seen as the transport fleet pushed deeper into the roiling madness of the warp. Through the viewports, the swirling chaos of the Immaterium pressed against their Geller field like hungry fingers testing a lock, while somewhere ahead waited an enemy that had learned to think. The great war machine of the Imperium stirred to life with the ponderous inevitability of a cathedral rising from bedrock. Across 17 worlds, regimental colors were unfurled, ammunition stockpiles were blessed by Ministorum priests, and the ancient machinery of Imperial logistics ground into motion. What had begun as distant reports of Xenos incursion now commanded the attention of Sector Command, and when the Imperium turned its gaze toward war, entire star systems trembled. In the armored command center beneath Mordian Prime's capital hive, tactical cogitator MX-7749 processed incoming data streams with mechanical precision. Its bronze skull servo skull attendants flitted between data ports, their augmetic tendrils interfacing with information networks that spanned the sector. Each blink of its optical sensors represented thousands of calculations, fleet movements coordinated across the void, supply chains orchestrated with clockwork efficiency that would have impressed the Adeptus Mechanicus themselves. Lord General Kazanik stood before the central hololith, his dress uniform replaced with practical field grey, adorned with only the most essential rank insignia. The tactical display showed the Mordian Sector in its full scope. Agricultural worlds, mining stations, forge planets, and the crown jewel of Mordian Prime itself, all connected by established warp routes that had carried Imperial commerce for millennia. Now, those same routes carried something else entirely. "Latest astropathic communications, my lord," reported Communications Officer Vex, her bionic implants whirring softly as she interfaced directly with the sector's psychic network. Ork fleet elements have been detected at translation points throughout the Outer Rim. Estimated arrival at Kalor Prime in 72 standard hours. The Lord General studied the projections with the calculating gaze of a master strategos. Kalor Prime occupied a crucial position in the sector's defensive network, too far from Mordian Prime to be easily reinforced, but strategically vital as the gateway to the inner systems. If Skarjaw's horde broke through there, they would have a clear path to the sector capital and the 20 billion souls who called it home. "Mobilization status of the 47th Iron Guard?" Kazanik inquired, his voice carrying the crisp authority that had commanded respect across 3 decades of Imperial service. Major Voss consulted his data slate, the pale glow illuminating his scarred features. "Transport fleet departing within the hour, my lord. Full regimental strength, 100,000 infantry, mechanized support battalions, artillery companies, and 3 squadrons of Valkyrie gunships. Colonel Thorne has implemented Battle Protocol Omega, full combat readiness with emergency ammunition reserves. Battle Protocol Omega." The phrase carried weight in Imperial military doctrine, reserved for situations where retreat was not merely discouraged, but physically impossible. It meant fighting to the last man, the last round, the last breath in service to the Golden Throne. Kazanik had invoked it only twice in his career, and both times the casualty reports had required prayer services for the sector's war dead that lasted for months. The hololith updated with fresh intelligence, crimson warning runes spreading across formerly green-coded systems like drops of blood on parchment. Long-range reconnaissance had finally penetrated the electromagnetic chaos surrounding Skarjaw's advance fleet, and what they revealed defied comprehension. The Ork armada was not simply large, it was a migration, an entire civilization on the move with ramshackle ships stretching from escort frigates to crude super battleships that dwarfed Imperial cruisers. "Emperor's blood," whispered astropath Morvek, his psychic consciousness briefly touching the edges of the green tide's approach. "Their thoughts. They're unified. This isn't random destruction, Lord General. There's purpose behind their advance." Purpose. The word hung in the command chamber's recycled air like incense at a funeral service. Random Ork raids could be contained, their typical lack of coordination exploited by superior Imperial tactics. But a unified Waaagh, driven by genuine strategic thinking, represented a threat several orders of magnitude more dangerous. The historical precedent was sobering. The last great Ork Waaagh. To demonstrate such coordination had required the intervention of 3 full Space Marine chapters to contain. Kazanik activated his personal Vox unit, the encrypted channel connecting him directly to Fleet Command. "This is Sector Command Actual. Initiate priority Alpha communication protocols. I need immediate consultation with the Adeptus Astartes." The request would ripple through Imperial bureaucracy with the speed of necessity, reaching the nearest Space Marine chapter through channels that bypassed normal administrative procedures. If Skarjaw's Waaagh truly represented an existential threat to the sector, then humanity's finest warriors would need to be informed, prepared, and if the Emperor willed it, deployed. Through the command center's armored viewports, the lights of Mordian Prime's hive spires stretched to the horizon like a constellation fallen to Earth. Each light represented families, workers, faithful servants of the Imperium going about their daily lives in blessed ignorance of the green storm approaching their worlds. It was for them that the 47th Iron Guard would stand and fight. For them that Imperial blood would be shed on distant battlefields. The Emperor's wrath was stirring, and soon the greenskins would learn why humanity had endured 10,000 years of endless war. The ash wastes of Kala Prime stretched endlessly beneath a sulfur-yellow sky, a landscape that looked like the Emperor's own wrath had been made manifest in stone and dust. Colonel Marcus Thorne crouched behind the twisted wreckage of an ancient mining crawler, his magnoculars trained on the horizon where heat shimmers danced like ghosts above the barren ground. 48 hours had passed since the 47th Mordian Iron Guard had made planetfall, and every instinct honed by 20 years of warfare screamed that they were being watched. "Movement, 2 kilometers northwest," reported Sergeant Major Corvin, his Vox transmitter crackling with atmospheric interference. The grizzled veteran had earned his rank stripes fighting greenskins on a dozen worlds, and his scarred hands moved with practiced efficiency as he adjusted his long-range Auspex scanner. "Multiple contacts, moving in formation. That's not normal Ork behavior, sir." Through his magnoculars, Thorne could make out dust clouds rising in the distance, too organized to be natural wind patterns, too deliberate to be mere coincidence. Standard Imperial doctrine taught that Orks were creatures of impulse and aggression, charging headlong into battle with more enthusiasm than strategy. But intelligence reports from the Outer Rim had spoken of changes in their behavior, a new discipline that made veteran commanders like Thorne deeply uneasy. The reconnaissance force consisted of 3 mechanized companies from the Iron Guard's elite 1st Battalion, their Chimera transports arranged in a defensive formation among the ancient mining equipment that littered this section of the waste. Each vehicle carried a full squad of Mordian infantry, their red-trimmed uniforms dulled with dust, but their lasguns maintained to parade ground perfection. These were soldiers who had drilled together for years, men who could execute complex maneuvers in their sleep and trusted each other with their lives. "Contact confirmed," came the voice of Lieutenant Vega over the company Voxnet. Her Chimera occupied the leftmost position in their perimeter, its turret-mounted heavy bolter trained toward the approaching dust clouds. Estimated 40 to 50 vehicles, mixed types. They're maintaining formation spacing, sir. Repeat, they're maintaining formation spacing. The implications sent a chill down Thorn's spine. Ork warbands were notorious for their complete lack of battlefield coordination. Individual tribes competing for glory and loot, even in the middle of pitched battles. Formation spacing suggested discipline, planning, leadership that could impose order on the chaotic green tide. It suggested that intelligence reports about Warboss Skarjaw had been accurate, perhaps even conservative. Through the enhanced optics of his Chimera's commander cupola, Captain Drexus of 2nd Company watched the approaching contacts with the analytical eye of a professional soldier. His augmetic left arm, a souvenir from a previous encounter with Ork technology, whirred softly as servo motors adjusted his weapon's targeting systems. "Colonel, I'm reading vehicle signatures consistent with Ork buggies and trucks, but their approach vector is all wrong. They should be charging straight at us, not maintaining that dispersed advance." The first visual contact came through Lieutenant Malari's position on the eastern flank. Her scout squad, equipped with long-range Vox gear and specialized reconnaissance equipment, had been observing through camellia line netting when the leading Ork elements crested a low ridge approximately 1,500 meters away. What she saw defied everything the Imperial Guard manual said about greenskin tactics. "Emperor's throne," Malari whispered into her Vox pickup, her voice tight with professional concern. "They're advancing in bounds, actual tactical bounds with covering fire and everything. These aren't the same Orks we fought on Vaxhallen." The approaching vehicles were crude even by Ork standards, ramshackle constructions of scrap metal and barely functional engines that belched black smoke into the ash-laden air. But their movement displayed an understanding of basic military principles that should have been beyond their primitive minds. Lead elements advanced while others provided overwatch. Flanking units maintained contact with the main body. And most disturbing of all, they showed fire discipline by not immediately opening fire at extreme range. Colonel Thorn made the tactical decision that would define the opening engagement of what historians would later call the Kaelor campaign. All units, weapons free, target the lead vehicles and attempt to disrupt their formation. Show these Xenos what happens when they face the Emperor's finest. The order rippled through the Iron Guard positions with parade ground precision. Heavy bolter turrets traversed toward their targets. Multi-laser arrays powered up with distinctive whining sounds, and individual guardsmen checked their lasgun power packs one final time. The distinctive crack hiss of lasgun fire began to echo across the wastes as disciplined volleys reached out toward the approaching greenskins. The first Ork buggy erupted in spectacular fashion, its crude fuel tank detonating in a pillar of orange flame that sent debris spinning through the sulfurous air. Then the second, and the third, precise Imperial marksmanship proving its worth against ramshackle Xenos engineering. But instead of the expected charge into the teeth of Imperial firepower, something unprecedented happened. The Orks stopped. They actually stopped, took cover behind rocky outcroppings, and began returning organized, suppressing fire. The Vox channels erupted with frantic reports as the impossible became reality across the ash wastes of Kaelor Prime. From every observation post, reconnaissance unit, and forward listening station came the same bewildering intelligence. The greenskins were demonstrating tactical coordination that violated every principle of Ork warfare doctrine. What had begun as a routine patrol engagement was rapidly revealing itself as humanity's first glimpse into something far more terrifying than mere Xenos aggression. All stations, all stations. This is Overlook 7, crackled the voice of Corporal Hendricks through the regimental Voxnet, his words punctuated by the distinctive whine of incoming Ork slugger rounds. "I've got visual on the main body. Emperor preserve us. There's millions of them. The entire horizon is green." From his elevated position atop a collapsed mining tower, Hendricks commanded a panoramic view of the Kalor plains that stretched for dozens of kilometers in every direction. Through his scoped rifle's magnification optics, he could see what aerial reconnaissance had only hinted at. Waaagh! Skarjaw was not merely an army, but an entire civilization on the move. Columns of ramshackle vehicles stretched beyond the horizon, their crude engines filling the air with black exhaust that blotted out the yellow sky. But it was not the numbers that sent ice through his veteran soldier's heart. It was the organization. Ork forces that should have been a chaotic mob were arranged in recognizable military formations. Battle wagon companies advanced in mutually supporting columns, flanked by fast-moving buggy squadrons that maintained proper reconnaissance distances. Most unsettling of all were the massive gargants that towered above the green tide, their crude but effective weapon systems scanning for targets with methodical precision. Colonel Thorne received these reports from his mobile command post, a heavily armored chimera bristling with communications equipment and tactical displays. The information painted a picture that challenged everything Imperial military doctrine taught about fighting greenskins. His senior staff officers gathered around the tactical hololith, their faces grim as they processed intelligence that redefined the threat level from manageable incursion to sector-wide catastrophe. "Sir," reported Major Kellick, the regiment's intelligence officer, his bionic eye whirring as it interfaced directly with the tactical cogitator systems. "Pattern analysis suggests we're looking at approximately 12 million Orks in the initial assault wave alone. Long-range augurs detect additional formations still in transit from their landing zones. Conservative estimates place total force strength at 40 million combatants." 40 million. The number hung in the command vehicle's recycled air like a funeral shroud. The entire Mordian Iron Guard, at full strength, numbered barely 100,000 soldiers, even accounting for Imperial technological superiority and defensive advantages. The mathematics of warfare were brutally simple. They were outnumbered 400 to 1. But numbers alone were not what made Thorne's blood run cold as he studied the incoming reports. Intelligence analysis revealed tactical innovations that should have been impossible for Ork minds to conceive. The greenskin advance incorporated feints and diversionary attacks, coordinated artillery barrages, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be actual battle plans that extended beyond the immediate engagement. "Long-range communication intercepts, sir," reported Vox operator Mansk, her augmetic implants allowing her to process multiple data streams simultaneously. "The Xenos are using coordinated command frequencies. They're actually talking to each other instead of just screaming and charging. Through the enhanced audio pickups, filtered through Imperial translation cogitators, came the guttural Ork battlefield communications that revealed the true scope of the threat. Warboss Skarjaw was not simply leading a typical Waaagh, driven by bloodlust and the desire for a good fight. His forces displayed unit designations, tactical call signs, and coordinated timing that suggested a level of military sophistication that violated everything humanity thought it knew about greenskin psychology. Lieutenant Colonel Vex, the regiment's second-in-command, voiced what everyone in the command group was thinking. "Sir, if these intelligence reports are accurate, we're not facing a traditional Ork incursion. This is something entirely different, something that can actually think." The tactical implications were staggering. Imperial defensive doctrine against Ork forces relied heavily on their predictable behavior patterns. The inevitable headlong charge, the lack of coordination between different units, the tendency for internal fighting to disrupt offensive operations. But Skarjaw's boys were demonstrating discipline that approached Imperial Guard standards, combined with the inherent physical advantages that made individual Orks such formidable opponents. From the forward observation posts came reports that painted an increasingly dire picture. The greenskin advance was probing Imperial positions with reconnaissance elements, testing defensive strengths and identifying weak points with methodical precision. When they encountered resistance, they flanked it. When they faced fortified positions, they bypassed them and struck at supply lines. Most ominously, they showed tactical patience, a trait that no previous Ork Waaagh had ever displayed. "Sir," reported communications specialist Torres, her voice tight with concern as she monitored sector-wide transmissions. "We're receiving distress calls from across the entire front. The Xenos aren't just attacking our positions. They're simultaneously striking at 17 different target zones with coordinated timing. This is a multi-vector assault with synchronized execution." Colonel Thorne stared at the tactical display, watching as red enemy contact symbols spread across the hololith like a malignant infection. Each symbol represented thousands of greenskins, and their movement patterns suggested a level of strategic thinking that had never before been recorded in the extensive Imperial archives on Ork warfare. The Emperor's children were about to face their greatest test, and for the first time in his military career, Marcus Thorne was not certain that faith and firepower would be enough. The proving ground of Kaelor Prime became a testament to 10,000 years of Imperial military excellence as the 47th Mordian Iron Guard executed their defensive preparations with clockwork precision. Despite the overwhelming odds revealed by reconnaissance reports, Colonel Thorne's veterans fell back on the fundamental principles that had sustained the Imperium through countless wars: discipline, training, and absolute faith in the Emperor's protection. What followed would be remembered in regimental histories as the perfect execution of defensive doctrine against impossible circumstances. 3rd Company, establish firing positions along Ridge 7 Alpha, commanded Captain Mordian through the tactical Voxnet, his voice carrying the calm authority that marked veteran Imperial officers. His men responded with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had drilled these movements thousands of times, their crimson-trimmed uniforms blending into carefully prepared camouflaged positions among the rocky outcroppings. Each guardsman carried his lasgun at the ready, power packs checked and rechecked, knowing that their next opportunity for resupply might be days away. The defensive perimeter took shape according to principles laid down in the Tactica Imperium, that sacred text which had guided Imperial warfare since the days of the Great Crusade. Overlapping fields of fire created kill zones where concentrated lasgun volleys could devastate attacking forces, while heavy weapons teams positioned their autocannons and missile launchers to engage armored targets at maximum effective range. Most importantly, retreat routes and rally points were established, allowing units to fall back in good order rather than be destroyed piecemeal. Master Sergeant Kowalski supervised the emplacement of the regimental heavy mortars, their blessed tubes elevated to provide indirect fire support across the entire defensive zone. Each shell had been consecrated by regimental chaplain Mordicus, their explosive warheads inscribed with prayers to the God Emperor and litanies of destruction against the alien foe. The mortar crews worked with practiced efficiency, establishing ammunition caches and calculating firing solutions for pre-planned target zones across the approaching battlefield. Range cards updated and distributed, reported Artillery Coordinator Vex, her augmetic implants interfacing directly with the targeting cogitators that would guide their fire missions. We have comprehensive coverage out to 12,000 meters, with priority targeting on likely armor approach routes. The Iron Guard's defensive preparations showcased the accumulated wisdom of a regiment that had faced Xenos threats across 3 sectors. Minefields were laid in irregular patterns designed to funnel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, while carefully concealed observation posts provided early warning and target designation for artillery strikes. Most crucially, backup positions were prepared at multiple depth levels, allowing defenders to conduct a fighting withdrawal that would bleed the enemy at every step. Lieutenant Voss coordinated the deployment of specialized equipment that would prove crucial in the coming engagement. Man-portable Auspex units were distributed to squad leaders, their machine spirits calibrated to detect the distinctive energy signatures of Ork technology. Vox repeaters were positioned to maintain communications even under the electromagnetic interference that typically accompanied greenskin assaults, while medical stations were established to provide immediate trauma care for the inevitable casualties. But it was the human element that truly exemplified Imperial military excellence. Every guardsman in the 47th had been selected for their unwavering loyalty to the Emperor and their ability to function under extreme stress. They came from the darkened foundry cities of Mordian Prime, where discipline was not merely military doctrine, but a way of life necessary for survival. These were men who had grown up knowing that order and precision were the only barriers between civilization and chaos. "Final equipment checks complete," announced Sergeant Major Corvin as he moved through the defensive positions, his veteran eye catching details that younger officers might miss. Each soldier's gear was arranged according to regulation specifications, spare power packs within easy reach, emergency medical supplies properly secured, personal protective equipment adjusted for optimal efficiency. More importantly, each man demonstrated the calm readiness that marked elite Imperial forces, alert but not tense, prepared but not anxious. The regimental colors flew proudly from Colonel Thorne's command position, their crimson and gold fabric snapping in the ash-laden wind like a defiant challenge to the approaching Xenos horde. Beneath that sacred banner, communications specialists maintained contact with Sector Command, updating tactical assessments and requesting additional support assets that might tip the balance in humanity's favor. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the ash wastes in shades of amber and gold, the Iron Guard completed their preparations. Forward observers reported increasing Ork activity on all fronts, with greenskin reconnaissance elements probing the defensive perimeter with disturbing tactical sophistication. The enemy was coming, their numbers beyond counting, their intentions clear. But the Emperor's finest were ready. They had trained for this moment, prepared for this test, and they would meet it with the same unwavering courage that had sustained the Imperium for 10 millennia. The greenskins would learn that discipline and faith were more powerful than mere numbers, and that Imperial blood was not easily spilled. In the gathering dusk of Kalor Prime, 100,000 voices whispered the litany of battle in perfect unison, their words carrying across the defensive lines like a prayer made manifest in steel and determination. The rumbling began at dawn, a sound that started as a barely perceptible vibration in the ash-covered ground and grew steadily into a mechanical thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of Kalor Prime. From his fortified observation post, Colonel Thorne watched through enhanced optics as the true genius of Warboss Skarjaw revealed itself across the killing fields. What approached the Imperial defensive lines was not the chaotic mob of traditional Ork warfare, but something far more terrifying. Organized, mechanized warfare guided by an alien intelligence that understood the principles of combined arms tactics. "Contact, bearing 270, reported forward observer Hendricks, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what his scopes revealed. "Lead elements consist of Emperor's blood, sir. Those aren't standard Ork vehicles. They've been modified for siege warfare." Through the magnified imagery transmitted to the command post, Thorne could see the approaching greenskin war machines in horrifying detail. Traditional Ork trucks and battle wagons had been transformed into crude but effective siege engines, their ramshackle frames reinforced with salvaged Imperial armor plating and fitted with oversized weapons that violated every principle of mechanical engineering, yet somehow functioned with brutal efficiency. Most disturbing were the massive drilling rigs mounted on tracked chassis, their spinning auger bits designed to breach the reinforced bunkers that formed the backbone of Imperial defensive doctrine. Big Mech technology, identified tech adept Zorian, his augmetic implants analyzing the Xeno's machinery with mechanical precision. Crude but effective adaptations of siege engineering principles. Estimated penetration capability against standard rockcrete fortifications. 73% probability of breach within 12 minutes of contact. The implications struck the command staff like a physical blow. Imperial defensive doctrine relied heavily on prepared positions and fortified strong points that could channel enemy attacks into predetermined killing zones. But Skarjaw's engineers had anticipated this strategy and developed specific countermeasures that could render traditional defenses obsolete. The Orks were not simply adapting to Imperial tactics, they were systematically defeating them. Behind the siege engines came the main assault force, and its composition defied everything the Codex Tacticus taught about greenskin military capabilities. Instead of the expected chaotic charge, Ork formations advanced in disciplined waves with proper spacing between vehicles. Battle wagon companies provided heavy fire support, while buggy squadrons executed flanking maneuvers that demonstrated genuine understanding of battlefield geometry. Most ominously, massive gargants moved with the ponderous inevitability of walking fortresses, their crude but powerful weapon systems seeking targets with methodical precision. "Tactical analysis complete," reported Major Kellick, his bionic eye interfacing with the regimental cogitators to process the incoming intelligence. Enemy force composition indicates combined arms coordination at the battalion level. They're integrating armor, infantry, artillery, and engineering assets in mutually supporting roles. This isn't typical Ork behavior. This is actual military science. The sound of the approaching horde grew steadily louder, a cacophony of engine noise, weapon fire, and the guttural roars of millions of greenskins that carried across the ash wastes like the voice of some primordial beast. But beneath the chaos lay something infinitely more dangerous, the rhythm of coordinated movement, the timing of professional soldiers who understood their roles in a larger tactical plan. Captain Drexus, commanding the regiment's heavy weapons companies, watched the enemy advance with the calculating eye of an artillery specialist. "Sir, their approach vectors are designed to minimize our defensive fire effectiveness. They're using terrain masking and approach angles that limit our engagement windows. Someone with actual tactical training is directing their movement." The first exchange of long-range fire began as Imperial heavy weapons opened up at maximum effective range, their blessed ammunition reaching out across the killing fields to strike at the leading Ork elements. Lascanon beams carved through the morning air to detonate fuel tanks and ammunition stores, while missile salvos rained down among the greenskin formations with satisfying explosions that sent debris spinning through the acrid atmosphere. But instead of the expected chaotic response, the Orks demonstrated fire discipline that shocked the Imperial observers. Counter-battery fire erupted from carefully positioned artillery pieces, crude but effective bombardments that sought out Imperial heavy weapon positions with disturbing accuracy. Suppressing fire from vehicle-mounted weapons forced Imperial gunners to seek cover, disrupting the carefully orchestrated defensive fires that should have devastated the attacking formations. "They're using actual artillery doctrine," reported Artillery Coordinator Vex, her voice tight with professional concern as she monitored the enemy bombardment patterns. Suppression, target acquisition, massed fires. These aren't random attacks, they're coordinated fire missions with proper sequencing and timing. Most disturbing of all were the massive construction vehicles that followed in the wake of the main assault force. Where traditional Ork tactics relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force, Skarjaw's engineers were preparing to establish permanent positions. Crude but effective fortifications began rising from the ash-covered ground, creating strong points that could support sustained operations rather than the hit-and-run raids typical of greenskin warfare. As the morning sun climbed higher into the sulfur-yellow sky, it became clear that the Iron Guard faced something unprecedented in Imperial military experience. This was not merely another Ork Waaagh, driven by bloodlust and the desire for destruction. This was organized warfare conducted by an alien intelligence that had studied Imperial tactics, identified their weaknesses, and developed specific countermeasures designed to neutralize humanity's technological and tactical advantages. The Emperor's children were about to face their greatest test, and the outcome would determine not merely the fate of Kalor Prime, but the survival of the entire Mordian Sector. The thunderous roar of descending drop pods shattered the morning air above Kalor Prime, their retro thrusters carving pillars of superheated flame through the ash-laden atmosphere as salvation fell from the Emperor's heavens. Each ceramite pod bore the proud colors of the Ultramarines chapter, their blue and gold heraldry gleaming like sapphires against the sulfur sky as they delivered the Emperor's angels of death directly into the heart of the escalating battle. From his command position, Colonel Thorne felt a surge of hope that he had not experienced since the first intelligence reports of Skarjaw's approach. "Drop pod assault confirmed," reported communications specialist Torres, her augmetic implants crackling with priority transmissions from orbit. Ultramarine Strike Force Herakles, commanded by Captain Ventress, 8th Company. Estimated strength, 120 battle brothers with full tactical support. The first pods impacted with bone-jarring force among the Ork advance elements, their armored hulls designed to survive atmospheric entry and serve as impromptu fortifications once planetside. As the drop pod petals opened like metallic flowers blooming in hell, Space Marines emerged in perfect combat formation, their blue power armor gleaming despite the coating of ash and debris that swirled through the battlefield air. Captain Uriel Ventress stepped from his drop pod with the fluid grace of a warrior born, his bolt pistol already tracking targets as his enhanced senses processed the tactical situation with superhuman speed. Behind him came the elite of the 8th Company, tactical Marines whose bolter drills had achieved perfection through centuries of constant warfare, Devastator squads whose heavy weapons could shatter tank armor with contemptuous ease, and assault Marines whose chainswords sang hymns of destruction in the Emperor's name. "Sergeant Pausanias," Ventress commanded through the Voxnet, his words carrying across the battlefield with the authority of the Adeptus Astartes. "Establish fire superiority on the left flank. Brother Lurkus, take your squad and eliminate those siege engines before they can breach the Imperial fortifications." The Space Marines moved with a precision that made even the disciplined Iron Guard appear clumsy by comparison. Each battle brother was a walking weapons platform, his power armor integrating targeting systems, battlefield communications, and life support into a seamless whole that amplified already superhuman capabilities. Their bolter fire reached out across the killing fields with accuracy that bordered on the supernatural, each shot placed with mathematical precision to achieve maximum tactical effect. Brother Lurkus led his tactical squad in a flanking assault against the Ork siege engines, their jump packs carrying them over terrain obstacles that would have channeled normal infantry into predetermined kill zones. His chainsword carved through the reinforced armor plating of a drilling rig like parchment, while his bolt pistol sent explosive rounds deep into the vehicle's crude but effective engine compartment. The resulting explosion sent greenskin bodies spinning through the air like broken dolls. But it was the psychological impact of the Astartes deployment that proved most significant in the opening moments of their intervention. The sight of the Emperor's angels fighting alongside them filled every guardsman in the Iron Guard with renewed determination, their lasgun fire becoming more accurate and sustained as they fought to prove themselves worthy of such prestigious allies. The Space Marines represented everything noble and heroic about humanity's struggle against the darkness. and their presence transformed a desperate defensive action into a righteous crusade. "Target-rich environment," reported Sergeant Pausanias as his Devastator squad established firing positions among the rocky outcroppings that dotted the battlefield. His missile launcher tracked a massive Ork battle wagon, the weapon's machine spirit calculating trajectory and target priority with cold mechanical precision. The resulting explosion gutted the enemy vehicle and sent its flaming wreckage tumbling end over end across the ash-covered ground. The Ork response to the Space Marine intervention revealed the true tactical sophistication that made Skarjaw's forces so dangerous. Instead of the expected disorganized charge toward the new threat, greenskin commanders began coordinating concentrated fire missions designed to overwhelm even power armor's protective capabilities. Heavy weapons teams focused their attention on individual Astartes, while artillery strikes began falling with disturbing accuracy around Space Marine positions. "Interesting," Captain Ventress observed as he analyzed the enemy response patterns through his helmet's tactical display. "These Xenos demonstrate genuine understanding of anti-Astartes warfare. They're concentrating firepower, using suppression tactics, and attempting to isolate individual battle brothers from mutual support." The battlefield became a deadly chess match between superhuman warriors and an alien intelligence that had studied their methods with disturbing thoroughness. Ork snipers, using crude but effective long-range weapons, began targeting the distinctive helmet lenses that marked Space Marine officers. Rocket-propelled grenades launched in coordinated salvos sought to exploit the brief moments when battle brothers moved between cover positions. Most ominously, the greenskins began demonstrating tactical innovations specifically designed to counter Space Marine advantages. Crude but effective trap mechanisms were deployed to channel assault marines into predetermined kill zones, while electromagnetic pulse weapons sought to disrupt the sophisticated systems that made power armor so effective. The Orks were not merely fighting the Ultramarines, they were adapting to them in real time. Still with us in the darkness of the 41st millennium? Hit that subscribe button if these tales of the Emperor's finest inspire your warrior spirit. More stories of heroism and horror await those who stand vigil with us. Through it all, the combined Imperial forces maintained their defensive integrity through discipline, coordination, and absolute faith in the Emperor's protection. Guardsmen and Space Marines fought as brothers in arms, their different capabilities complementing each other in the perfect expression of Imperial military doctrine. The tide of battle began to shift as superior training and equipment asserted themselves against raw numbers and alien cunning. But in the distance, something far more dangerous than ordinary Ork warriors was stirring. The distinctive bark of bolt weapons echoed across the ash wastes as the Ultramarines unleashed the Emperor's fury with surgical precision, each shot a prayer made manifest in mass-reactive explosive rounds that tore through greenskin flesh with divine wrath. Brother Sergeant Lucius moved through the battlefield like a living weapon, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to process tactical information at speeds that would overwhelm mortal minds, while his blessed bolter cycled through ammunition with mechanical perfection that had been honed through centuries of constant warfare. "Contact front, massive formation," reported Tactical Marine Ventanus through the squad Voxnet, his Auspex scanner detecting enemy signatures that registered beyond the device's upper limits. Estimated strength. Emperor's throne, they just keep coming. The true scope of Skarjaw's Waaagh became horrifyingly clear as wave after wave of greenskin warriors crested the distant ridgelines, their crude weapons glinting in the sulfur-tinted sunlight like a vast metallic sea. But these were not the disorganized mobs that Imperial doctrine expected from Ork forces. They advanced in formations that displayed genuine tactical coordination, with heavy weapons teams providing covering fire, while assault elements maneuvered to exploit weaknesses in the Imperial defensive perimeter. Captain Ventris coordinated the Astartes' response with the cold efficiency that marked the Ultramarines' adherence to the Codex Astartes, that sacred text which had guided space marine warfare for 10,000 years. His tactical display showed enemy movements in real time, processed through cogitator systems that could calculate firing solutions and movement vectors with superhuman precision. Each decision was made with perfect knowledge of the battlefield situation and absolute confidence in his battle brother's abilities. Devastator Squad Titus. Priority targets are the Ork artillery positions at bearing 285. He commanded through the Vox channels that linked every Astartes warrior into a seamless tactical network. Brother Pausanias. Coordinate with Imperial Guard heavy weapons for maximum suppression effect. The Devastator Marines responded with the mechanical precision of weapons platforms designed specifically for this type of engagement. Heavy bolters opened up with sustained fire that chewed through greenskin formations like chainswords through parchment, while missile launchers reached out across kilometers of battlefield to strike at high-value targets with explosive warheads blessed by the chapter's tech marines. Each shot was placed with mathematical accuracy, guided by targeting systems that interfaced directly with the Space Marines' enhanced nervous systems. Brother Pausanias, his servo arm whirring as it loaded fresh ammunition into his heavy bolter, carved bloody swathes through the approaching Ork formations with sustained fire that never seemed to slacken. His weapon's machine spirit had been awakened through ritual and prayer, its targeting algorithms enhanced by centuries of battlefield experience that had been encoded into its blessed circuitry. Greenskin warriors fell in windows before his position, their crude armor no match for mass-reactive rounds fired with supernatural accuracy. But it was the psychological impact of witnessing Space Marines in combat that proved most devastating to the Ork assault. These aliens, whose entire culture revolved around violence and combat prowess, found themselves facing opponents who embodied warfare in its most perfect form. Each Astartes warrior moved with fluid grace that made their massive power armor appear weightless, while their tactical coordination demonstrated a level of battlefield awareness that transcended mortal limitations. Enemy formation breaking on the left flank, reported Assault Sergeant Uriel as his jump pack squad carved through a concentration of Ork stormboys with chainswords that howled hymns of destruction. His power weapon crackled with disruptive energy fields as it cleaved through alien flesh and crude armor with contemptuous ease, each stroke executed with perfect form that had been drilled into his muscle memory through decades of constant training. The combined arms coordination between Space Marines and Imperial Guard units showcased the fundamental principles that had sustained the Imperium through 10 millennia of constant warfare. Where the Astartes provided shock assault capabilities and superhuman leadership, the Iron Guard contributed disciplined firepower and tactical flexibility that multiplied the overall combat effectiveness of the combined force. Guardsmen fought with renewed determination, knowing that the Emperor's chosen warriors stood beside them, while Space Marines benefited from the overlapping fields of fire and logistical support that only regular Imperial forces could provide. Ammunition expenditure at 67%, reported Brother Tech Marine Hestian as he monitored the squad's tactical status through his armor's diagnostic systems. Weapons functioning within acceptable parameters. No malfunctions detected. The battle rhythm settled into the deadly cadence of professional soldiers executing their craft with lethal precision. Bolter fire reached out in controlled bursts, designed to conserve ammunition while maximizing battlefield effect, while heavy weapons teams coordinated their fires to create overlapping kill zones that channeled enemy movement into predetermined target areas. Most importantly, the Space Marines demonstrated the tactical flexibility that allowed them to adapt to changing battlefield conditions faster than their enemies could respond. Through the enhanced optics of his helmet display, Captain Ventress watched the Ork formations begin to falter as superior Imperial firepower took its inevitable toll. Greenskin casualties mounted steadily as disciplined volleys carved through their ranks, while the alien warriors found their usual tactics of overwhelming assault neutralized by defensive positions that had been prepared with mathematical precision. For the first time since intelligence reports had begun arriving about Skarjaw's approach, victory seemed not merely possible, but probable. But even as the immediate threat appeared to be contained, long-range auger sweeps detected something approaching from the Ork rear areas that would change the entire character of the engagement. The ground trembled with each thunderous step as Warboss Skarjaw himself entered the battlefield, his massive form towering above even the largest of his knob bodyguards like a primordial force of destruction made manifest in scarred green flesh and crude but devastating technology. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, the Ork warlord was a walking testament to decades of constant warfare, his body bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, while his crude power armor leaked promethium fuel and hydraulic fluid with each ponderous movement across the ash-covered killing fields. "Priority target identified," reported Brother Sergeant Lurchus through the tactical Voxnet, his enhanced vision processing the threat assessment data that flooded his helmet display. Massive Ork commander, accompanied by elite bodyguard formation. Estimated threat level, extreme. Through the magnified optics of his scope, Sniper Hendricks watched the warboss approach with the clinical detachment of a professional marksman who had spent his entire career studying alien anatomy for weak points. What he saw defied every tactical manual's description of Ork leadership capabilities. Skarjaw moved with purposeful intent, rather than the mindless aggression typical of his species, his piggy eyes scanning the battlefield with an intelligence that suggested genuine strategic thinking rather than mere animal cunning. The warboss's weapon was a massive power claw that crackled with barely contained energy, its crude construction belying the devastating effectiveness of its disruptor field generators. Attached to his left arm was a combi weapon that combined a shooter with a rocket launcher, while his power armor incorporated enough ducker to outfit an entire squad of lesser orcs. Most disturbing were the trophies hanging from his belt. Space Marine helmet fragments, Imperial Guard regimental colors, and what appeared to be the severed head of an Astra Militarum general. "That's the Humi boss!" Skarjaw's voice boomed across the battlefield in accented Gothic, his words carrying clearly despite the continuous thunder of weapons fire. "Where is ya, Space Marine? Come and have a proper scrap with Skarjaw the Destroyer." The challenge sent ripples of unease through the Imperial forces, not because they feared single combat, but because it revealed something unprecedented about this particular Ork warlord. Traditional greenskin leaders were creatures of impulse who charged headlong into battle seeking individual glory. But Skarjaw was calling out his opponents with tactical precision, attempting to draw the most dangerous Imperial warriors into personal combat, where his superior size and strength could neutralize their technological advantages. Captain Ventress analyzed the tactical situation through his helmet's cogitator systems, weighing the psychological impact of accepting such a challenge against the strategic risk of losing senior leadership to alien treachery. The Codex Astartes provided clear guidance on such situations. Individual heroics must never compromise the overall mission objectives. Yet he also understood that sometimes the greatest victories required calculated risks that went beyond mere tactical doctrine. "Brother Pausanias," Ventress commanded through the Squad Vox channel, "maintain overwatch positions and be prepared to provide supporting fire. This creature seeks to disrupt our command structure through personal challenge." The warboss advanced through the battlefield carnage with the confident swagger of a creature that had never known defeat, his massive boots crushing the remains of his own warriors with casual indifference. Behind him came an elite formation of mega-nobs, their crude power armor making them nearly as formidable as Space Marines, while flanking elements of Storm Boys used their rocket packs to maintain aerial reconnaissance of potential threats. "Target acquisition confirmed," reported Devastator Marine Titus as his missile launcher's machine spirit calculated trajectory solutions for engaging the approaching threat. "Requesting permission to engage with crack missiles." But before Captain Ventress could respond, something unprecedented happened. Warboss Skarjaw raised his massive power claw in what appeared to be a gesture of temporary ceasefire. His scarred features twisted into what might have been an attempt at diplomatic communication. When he spoke again, his words demonstrated a grasp of Imperial Gothic that suggested genuine intellectual capabilities rather than mere learned phrases. "You fight good, Space Marines," the Warboss rumbled, his voice carrying across the sudden lull in weapons fire. "But this is just a start. Skarjaw's got bigger plans than just smashing your gits. This whole sector gonna burn, and you can't stop it." The implications struck the Imperial commanders like physical blows. This was not mere battlefield taunting, or the crude psychological warfare typical of Ork leadership. Skarjaw was demonstrating strategic thinking that encompassed objectives beyond the immediate engagement, suggesting that his Waaagh represented something far more dangerous than traditional greenskin aggression. "That's right, Humie boss," the Warboss continued, pointing his massive weapon directly at Captain Ventress's position. "You can see it now, can't you? This ain't no ordinary Waaagh. Skarjaw's learned from your gits, studied your ways, figured out how to beat you at your own game." The psychological warfare was as sophisticated as anything in Imperial tactical doctrine, designed to demoralize enemy forces by demonstrating superior intelligence and strategic planning. Most disturbing was the accuracy of the Warboss's assessment. His forces had indeed demonstrated tactical innovations that neutralized traditional Imperial advantages through careful study and adaptation. As the two forces faced each other across the ash-covered killing fields, the true scope of the threat became clear. This was not merely another alien incursion to be contained through superior firepower and discipline. This was a test of everything the Imperium believed about its own military superiority, and the outcome would determine whether humanity's 10,000-year dominance could survive contact with an enemy that had learned to think. The battlefield transformed into a deadly chessboard as Captain Ventress coordinated the most complex tactical maneuver of his distinguished career, weaving together Space Marine shock assault capabilities with Imperial Guard fire support in a masterpiece of combined arms warfare that would be studied in the halls of the Fortress of Hera for centuries to come. His enhanced mind processed dozens of tactical variables simultaneously, while his Vox channels crackled with precision orders that demonstrated why the Ultramarines were considered the exemplars of the Codex Astartes. Phase 1 Initiation, Ventress commanded through the tactical network that linked every Imperial unit across the battlefield. Iron Guard companies execute flanking movement on bearing 090. Devastator squads provide suppressive fire on designated target zones. Assault Marines prepare for deep penetration strike. The plan unfolded with mechanical precision as Colonel Thorne's regiments began their coordinated advance, their crimson-trimmed uniforms barely visible through the ash-laden air as they moved with parade ground discipline through terrain that would have challenged veteran mountaineers. Each Chimera transport maintained perfect formation spacing while their embarked squads prepared for the rapid deployment that would be crucial to the maneuver's success. Brother Sergeant Lurchus led the spearhead assault, his jump pack squad descending from the rocky heights like avenging angels as they struck directly at the command structure of Skarjaw's formation. Their chainswords carved through orc knobs with contemptuous ease, while bolt pistols sent explosive rounds deep into alien flesh with surgical precision. Most importantly, Their sudden appearance behind enemy lines forced the greenskin reserves to redeploy, disrupting the defensive coordination that had made Skarjaw's forces so effective. Enemy response patterns consistent with tactical doctrine, reported Tactical Marine Ventanus as he monitored Ork communications through captured Vox equipment. They're attempting to counter our flanking movement with reserves from the eastern sectors. Estimated redeployment time, 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Captain Ventress calculated the tactical timeline with superhuman precision, weighing movement rates against enemy response capabilities to determine the optimal moment for each phase of the evolving engagement. The Codex Astartes provided detailed guidance for such situations, but battlefield conditions demanded adaptations that required genuine tactical genius rather than mere adherence to established doctrine. The Iron Guard's flanking movement developed with textbook precision as mechanized companies advanced through terrain that offered concealment from direct observation while maintaining tactical cohesion. Their Chimera transports moved in bounds, each vehicle providing covering fire while others maneuvered to more advantageous positions. When Ork scouts finally detected their approach, disciplined lasgun volleys eliminated the threats before they could report Imperial positions. "Contact left, multiple vehicles," reported Captain Drexus, as his company engaged a formation of Ork war buggies that had been positioned to counter exactly this type of flanking maneuver. His autocannon opened up with sustained fire that chewed through ramshackle armor plating, while missile teams targeted the largest threats with crack warheads that sent alien machinery spinning through the air in flaming debris. But the true genius of Ventress's plan became apparent as the multiple elements converged on their objectives with split-second timing. Just as Ork reserves moved to counter the Iron Guard's flanking assault, Devastator squads opened up with concentrated heavy weapons fire that decimated greenskin formations caught in the open. Simultaneously, assault marines struck at communication nodes and command vehicles, disrupting the coordination that had made Skarjaw's forces so dangerous. Phase 2 execution, Ventress commanded as the tactical situation developed exactly as his calculations had predicted. All units converge on primary objective, maximum suppression fire on enemy command elements. The convergent assault showcased the fundamental principles that had sustained Imperial military doctrine for 10 millennia. Superior training allowed human forces to execute complex maneuvers that would have been impossible for alien minds to coordinate, while technological advantages in communications and targeting systems provided crucial advantages in the chaotic environment of mechanized warfare. Most importantly, absolute faith in the Emperor's protection gave every Imperial warrior the courage to advance into the teeth of enemy fire. Warboss Skarjaw found himself caught in the center of a tactical vice that was closing with inexorable precision. His crude but effective command structure began breaking down as Space Marine assault teams eliminated key subordinates, while his reserve formations were pinned down by devastating Imperial firepower that made movement across open ground suicidal. For the first time in his violent career, the massive Ork warlord faced opponents who could outthink as well as outfight his forces. That's not possible!" Skarjaw roared as he watched his carefully prepared positions collapse under the coordinated Imperial assault. His piggy eyes darted frantically across the battlefield as he tried to process tactical developments that exceeded his intellectual capabilities despite his unprecedented cunning. The psychological impact of superior generalship was devastating to Ork morale. Greenskin warriors who had followed Skarjaw across a dozen star systems because of his apparent invincibility suddenly found themselves leaderless as their command structure disintegrated under precise Imperial strikes. Individual units began fighting independently rather than as part of coordinated formations, reverting to the chaotic behavior patterns that made them vulnerable to disciplined human forces. Enemy formation integrity compromised, reported Major Kellick as his intelligence analysis revealed the scope of the tactical victory. Ork units displaying typical disorganization patterns. Command authority appears to be fragmenting. Through the smoke and chaos of the evolving battle, Captain Ventress allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Codex Astartes had once again proven its worth, its tactical principles adapted to meet unprecedented threats through the application of strategic thinking that transcended mere battlefield experience. The Emperor's children had faced their greatest test and proven themselves worthy of their sacred trust. But victory was not yet complete, and the most dangerous phase of the engagement was about to begin. The tide of battle shifted with the inexorable weight of inevitability as Warboss Skarjaw's legendary invincibility crumbled beneath the sustained assault of superior Imperial tactics and unshakable human determination. Across the ash-covered killing fields of Kalor Prime, individual Ork units began displaying the telltale signs of morale collapse that had been documented in countless Imperial after-action reports. Hesitant advances, increased communication chatter, and most crucially, the breakdown of tactical coordination that had made this particular Waaagh so uniquely dangerous. Enemy cohesion failing on all fronts, reported Intelligence Officer Kellick as he monitored greenskin communications through captured Vox equipment, his augmetic implants processing the guttural alien language with mechanical precision. Individual clan leaders are beginning to question Skarjaw's tactical decisions. We're detecting increased infighting between different tribal elements. The psychological warfare that Captain Ventress had unleashed was proving more devastating than any artillery barrage. By demonstrating superior generalship in direct comparison to Skarjaw's crude but effective leadership, the Ultramarines had struck at the very foundation of Ork society, their absolute faith in the biggest and strongest as natural leaders. When that faith began to waver, the entire social structure that held the Waaagh together started to disintegrate. From his command, Chimera, Colonel Thorne watched the enemy formation through enhanced optics that revealed the scope of their tactical victory. Ork units that had advanced with disciplined coordination mere hours earlier were now reverting to the chaotic behavior patterns described in every Imperial Guard manual on Xenos warfare. Individual war buggies broke formation to pursue personal vendettas, while boys' mobs began fighting each other over perceived slights and tactical disagreements. Skarjaw's personal guard is pulling back toward the central position, observed Sniper Hendricks from his elevated observation post, his scope tracking the massive warboss through the battlefield chaos. The big git looks confused. Never seen an Ork look confused before. The confusion was visible even at extreme range as Skarjaw's primitive but cunning mind struggled to process tactical developments that exceeded his intellectual capabilities. The warboss had built his reputation on an unprecedented ability to impose order on the chaotic nature of Ork society, but that order was fragmenting under pressure from opponents who could outthink as well as outfight his forces. His roared commands became increasingly desperate as subordinate units ignored orders in favor of pursuing individual objectives. Brother Sergeant Lurkus pressed the tactical advantage with clinical precision, leading his assault squad in a series of surgical strikes designed to exploit the growing disorganization in enemy ranks. His chainsword carved through Ork nobs, who were too busy arguing with their own troops to maintain proper defensive positions, while bolt pistol fire eliminated key leaders whose deaths further accelerated the collapse of greenskin coordination. Target-rich environment, reported Devastator Marine Titus as his heavy bolter found abundant opportunities among Ork formations that had abandoned proper tactical spacing. His weapon's machine spirit sang hymns of destruction as mass-reactive rounds chewed through alien flesh with mathematical precision, each burst carefully calculated to maximize psychological impact on surviving enemies. The Iron Guard pressed their advantage with the relentless efficiency that had earned the 47th Regiment their reputation across 3 sectors. Mechanized companies advanced in perfect coordination, their Chimera transports providing mobile fire platforms, while dismounted squads secured key terrain features with disciplined precision. Most importantly, they maintained tactical cohesion even as victory became increasingly apparent, demonstrating the professional discipline that separated Imperial forces from mere armed mobs. Second Company reports breakthrough on the eastern flank, announced Captain Mordian through the regimental Voxnet. Enemy resistance collapsing. We have clear fields of fire on their command elements. The breakdown of Ork morale accelerated as individual units began withdrawing without orders, their crude but effective coordination replaced by the every green skin for himself mentality that made them vulnerable to concentrated Imperial firepower. Clan leaders who had sworn loyalty to Skarjaw began reassessing their allegiances as his apparent invincibility evaporated under sustained assault from opponents who understood the true nature of warfare. This ain't right," Skarjaw bellowed across the battlefield, his massive form clearly visible as he gestured frantically at subordinates who were no longer listening to his commands. "You gits follow Skarjaw. Skarjaw is the biggest and the strongest." But size and strength meant nothing when tactical superiority rendered them irrelevant. Captain Ventress had demonstrated the fundamental principle that separated civilized warfare from mere violence. The application of strategic thinking that could predict and counter enemy responses through careful analysis and preparation. The Codex Astartes had once again proven its worth against an unprecedented threat. The tension builds as the greatest Ork warboss in 3 centuries faces the collapse of everything he has built. Subscribe to witness how this tale of Imperial triumph concludes. The Emperor's light burns brightest in the darkest hour. Through the enhanced optics of his helmet display, Ventress watched the Ork formation disintegrate with the satisfaction of a master tactician whose calculations had achieved perfect execution. The enemy's tactical innovations had been neutralized through superior coordination and unshakable discipline, proving once again that human determination could overcome any alien threat when properly directed. But even as victory appeared certain, long-range augurs detected massive energy signatures approaching from the Ork rear areas, signatures that suggested Skarjaw had one final desperate gambit prepared for deployment. The ground shook with seismic violence as something monstrous emerged from the Ork rear positions, its massive form blotting out portions of the sulfur-yellow sky like a walking mountain of scrap metal and barely contained destruction. Through the enhanced optics of his command post, Colonel Thorne watched in horrified fascination as Warboss Skarjaw's final gambit revealed itself, a jury-rigged gargant of unprecedented size, its crude construction incorporating salvaged Imperial technology in ways that violated every principle of engineering while somehow achieving terrifying effectiveness. "Emperor's blood," whispered tech adept Zorian, his augmetic implants struggling to process sensor readings that defied mechanical comprehension. "That abomination is generating power signatures consistent with a battleship-grade reactor. The Xenos have somehow stabilized a plasma core using... I can't even determine what they're using for containment." The Gargant stood nearly 60 meters tall, its ramshackle frame constructed from the hulks of destroyed Imperial vehicles welded together with crude but effective Ork engineering that created a walking fortress of devastating firepower. Massive weapon batteries protruded from every available mounting point, while its crude but functional targeting systems swept the battlefield with mechanical precision that suggested the involvement of captured Imperial technology. But it was the cargo bay modifications that sent ice through every Imperial observer's heart. Instead of the typical Ork infantry complement, the Gargant's belly had been converted into a massive containment system filled with what appeared to be thousands of explosive squigs, their bloated forms visible through crude viewing ports that leaked sickly green light across the ash-covered battlefield. Each squig had been modified with additional explosive charges, creating biological missiles that could devastate entire formations upon impact. "Tactical assessment complete," reported Captain Ventress through the command Voxnet, his enhanced mind processing threat vectors with superhuman speed. The Xenos war machine represents a strategic-level threat to all Imperial forces in this sector. Immediate withdrawal recommended to preserve combat effectiveness. But Colonel Thorne understood what every veteran officer knew in his bones. Some battles could not be won through withdrawal, no matter how tactically sound the decision might appear. The Gargant represented more than mere battlefield superiority. It was Skarjaw's attempt to restore his shattered reputation through one final demonstration of overwhelming force. If it succeeded, the psychological impact would rally his fractured forces and turn tactical defeat into strategic disaster. "All units, prepare for final defensive action," Thorne commanded, his words carrying across the regimental Vox channels with the calm authority that marked professional soldiers facing impossible odds. "We hold this ground. The Emperor protects." The Gargant's weapons opened up with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the planet, massive shells and energy beams reaching across kilometers of battlefield to strike at Imperial positions with crude but devastating accuracy. Rock-crete fortifications that had withstood hours of conventional bombardment crumbled under the assault, while entire squads disappeared in explosions that sent debris spinning through the ash-laden air. Brother Sergeant Lurkus coordinated the Space Marine response with tactical precision that demonstrated why the Adeptus Astartes were considered humanity's finest warriors. His assault squad used jump packs to achieve firing positions that offered clear sight lines to the war machine's vulnerable points, while Devastator teams focused their heaviest weapons on what appeared to be critical structural elements. "Target the leg joints," Lurkus commanded through the tactical Voxnet, his enhanced vision identifying weak points in the Gargant's construction that might be exploited by concentrated firepower. "If we can compromise its mobility, the Xenos will be forced to deploy their cargo prematurely." The combined Imperial firepower reached out across the killing fields with mathematical precision, Lascanon beams and missile salvos converging on critical structural elements, while heavy bolter fire sought to disrupt the crude but effective targeting systems that made the war machine so dangerous. But the Gargant's armor plating, constructed from salvaged Imperial materials, proved disturbingly resistant to conventional weapons. Most terrifying was the sound emanating from the war machine's cargo bay, the squealing and chittering of thousands of explosive squigs being prepared for deployment. Intelligence reports had documented the use of such creatures in previous Ork assaults, but never in such concentrated numbers or with such sophisticated delivery systems. When those biological missiles reached Imperial lines, the resulting carnage would be beyond calculation. "Squig deployment imminent," reported Auspec's operator Vensk, his augmetic sensors detecting the mechanical systems that would launch the living bombs across the battlefield. Estimated time to release, 90 seconds. 90 seconds to prevent a catastrophe that would destroy everything they had fought to achieve. Captain Ventress calculated the tactical options with superhuman speed, weighing assault probabilities against defensive capabilities while coordinating with Imperial Guard units, whose courage had never faltered despite facing odds that would have broken lesser men. "Brother Pausanias," Ventress commanded, "prepare for close assault on the war machine. All Devastator squads focus maximum firepower on the cargo bay containment systems. If we can detonate their explosives prematurely, The desperate gambit represented everything noble about Imperial military doctrine. The willingness to sacrifice individual safety for the greater good, the application of tactical thinking under extreme pressure, and absolute faith that the Emperor's protection would see them through their darkest hour. Win or lose, they would meet their fate as befitted the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced. The Gargant lurched forward with ponderous inevitability, its massive footsteps leaving craters in the ash-covered ground as it approached the Imperial lines with mechanical precision that promised annihilation for everything in its path. The moment of ultimate testing arrived as every Imperial soul on Kalor Prime stood united in defiance against the mechanical monstrosity that thundered toward their positions with the inexorable weight of impending doom. Guardsmen who had never seen a Space Marine before today found themselves fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Emperor's chosen warriors, while Astartes, who typically operated as elite strike forces, coordinated their efforts with common soldiers whose courage matched their own despite lacking superhuman enhancements. For the Emperor and Mordian. Colonel Thorne's voice rang across the defensive lines. His words picked up and repeated by 100,000 throats as the 47th Iron Guard prepared to write their names in the annals of Imperial glory. Each guardsman checked his weapon one final time, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether their homeworld lived or died under the green tide of alien destruction. Brother Pausanias led the desperate assault against the Gargant's massive legs, his servo arm whirring as it loaded a fresh belt of blessed ammunition into his heavy bolter, while his enhanced strength carried him across terrain that would have challenged unaugmented humans. Behind him came tactical marines whose bolt weapons spat death with mechanical precision, each shot carefully placed to exploit the crude welding joints that held the war machine's ramshackle construction together. Structural damage confirmed on the forward left actuator, reported Tech Marine Hestian as his augmetic sensors analyzed the effect of concentrated firepower on the Gargant's locomotive systems. Continue current engagement pattern. The machine spirit of this abomination grows weak under righteous assault. The Gargant's response was immediate and devastating. Secondary weapons batteries swiveled to track the attacking Space Marines, crude but effective targeting systems calculating firing solutions with mechanical precision that sent streams of Daka rounds and rocket projectiles screaming through the ash-laden air. One tactical Marine disappeared in a burst of superheated plasma, his power armor's machine spirit offering a final prayer to the Omnissiah before its blessed circuits failed. But for every Astartes who fell, 10 Imperial Guardsmen stepped forward to fill the gap. Sergeant Major Corvin led his veterans in a flanking assault that brought their demolition charges within range of the war machine's rear armor, while artillery teams coordinated indirect fire missions that rained blessed shells down upon the crude but massive target with mathematical precision. "Squig containment breach detected," announced Auspex operator Vensk, his voice tight with professional concern as he monitored the explosive cargo that represented certain death for anyone within a kilometer radius. Biological weapons deployment in 30 seconds and counting. 30 seconds. The words hung in the recycled air of command posts and fighting positions across the battlefield like the tolling of funeral bells. Every Imperial warrior understood the mathematics of the situation. When those explosive squigs deployed, concentrated in such numbers, the resulting carnage would make tactical withdrawal impossible and strategic victory meaningless. Captain Ventress made the decision that would define not only his own legend, but the future of the entire Mordian Sector. All units, concentrate maximum firepower on the cargo bay containment systems. Ignore secondary targets. Everything we have, everything we are, focused on that single objective. The combined firepower of an entire Space Marine strike force and a full Imperial Guard regiment converged on a single point with the focused intensity of a stellar laser. Lascannon beams carved through crude armor plating while missile salvos struck with pinpoint accuracy, guided by targeting data shared between human and transhuman warriors whose coordination transcended the normal limitations of battlefield communication. Master Sergeant Kowalski's mortar teams adjusted their elevation with mechanical precision, walking their blessed shells along the Gargant's hull until they found the weak points where explosive force could penetrate the ramshackle construction. Each shell had been personally consecrated by Chaplain Mordicus, their warheads inscribed with prayers that called upon the Emperor's divine wrath to guide them to their targets. The breakthrough came when Brother Sergeant Lurchus, his jump pack carrying him directly onto the war machine's hull, placed a melter charge against what appeared to be a critical structural junction. The resulting explosion tore through jury-rigged containment systems with devastating effect, triggering a chain reaction that detonated the squig cargo in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. Secondary explosions detected throughout the target, reported Devastator Marine Titus, his targeting systems tracking the cascade of destruction that rippled through the Gargant's internal structure. The Xenos war machine is suffering catastrophic system failures. But even as victory appeared within grasp, the mortally wounded Gargant continued its advance with mechanical determination that spoke to the crude but effective engineering that had created it. Hydraulic systems leaked promethium across its hull, while electrical fires sparked from damaged circuitry, but its massive legs continued their inexorable march toward the Imperial lines where its final collapse would crush hundreds of defenders. "All units, emergency withdrawal to secondary positions," commanded Colonel Thorne, his tactical experience recognizing that sometimes victory required knowing when to retreat. "Maintain formation cohesion. The Emperor protects those who serve with discipline." The combined Imperial forces executed their withdrawal with the professional competence that had sustained the Imperium through 10,000 years of constant warfare. Space Marines provided covering fire, while Guard units leapfrogged between defensive positions, their movement coordinated through Vox channels that crackled with precise orders and situation reports. Above them, the Gargant's death throes painted the sulfur sky with pillars of flame and smoke as its crude but massive reactor finally succumbed to cumulative damage, creating an explosion that would be recorded in Imperial archives as one of the largest non-nuclear detonations in the sector's military history. When the smoke cleared and the debris stopped falling, Warboss Skarjaw's final gambit had become his ultimate defeat. The silence that followed the Gargant's destruction was more profound than any thunder of weapons, a deathly quiet that settled over the ash wastes of Kalor Prime like the breath of the Emperor himself, blessing his faithful children who had stood firm against impossible odds. Through the slowly clearing smoke and debris, Imperial forces began to assess the magnitude of their victory, while the scattered remnants of Skarjaw's once mighty Waaagh fled across the horizon like broken shadows of their former menace. Captain Ventress surveyed the battlefield through his helmet's enhanced optics, cataloging the tactical lessons that would be incorporated into future revisions of the Codex Astartes. The smoking crater where the Gargant had made its final stand stretched nearly 100 meters across, its edges still glowing with the residual heat of exotic reactions that had consumed the war machine's crude but massive reactor core. Around the crater's rim, twisted fragments of scrap metal and alien machinery bore testament to the engineering marvel that Ork cunning had somehow made functional. "Casualty reports. All units," commanded Colonel Thorne through the regimental Voxnet, his voice carrying the weary satisfaction of a commander who had led his men through hell and brought most of them home again. The responses came back with parade ground precision. Losses had been significant but not catastrophic. Wounded were being evacuated to field medical stations, and most importantly, unit cohesion remained intact despite the unprecedented nature of the engagement. Brother Sergeant Lurkus coordinated the systematic elimination of scattered Ork survivors, his tactical squads moving through the battlefield debris with clinical efficiency to ensure that no greenskin remnants could regroup and threaten Imperial civilians. Each alien corpse was confirmed dead through direct examination, while captured equipment was secured for analysis by tech marines whose expertise could extract valuable intelligence from Xenos technology. Enemy command structure completely eliminated, reported Intelligence Officer Kellick, as his teams processed the tactical intelligence gathered during the final engagement. Warboss Skarjaw confirmed deceased, along with his entire senior leadership cadre. Surviving Ork elements are displaying typical disorganization patterns consistent with complete command collapse. The death of Skarjaw represented more than mere tactical victory. It was the elimination of an unprecedented threat that had challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying Imperial military doctrine. Intelligence analysis revealed the scope of what they had faced. An Ork warlord whose cunning had approached genuine strategic thinking, whose forces had demonstrated coordination that violated every principle of greenskin psychology, and whose tactical innovations had required the combined efforts of Space Marines and Imperial Guard to defeat. Master Sergeant Kowalski supervised the recovery of fallen comrades, ensuring that every Imperial warrior who had made the ultimate sacrifice would be returned to sacred soil for proper burial rites. The casualty collection points became solemn gatherings, where survivors honored their fallen brothers, their voices raised in prayers that would carry the names of heroes to the Golden Throne itself. Final tally confirms enemy losses at approximately 37 million combatants, announced Major Voss, his data slate displaying intelligence estimates that spoke to the magnitude of the threat they had neutralized. Surviving elements estimate at less than 3 million, scattered across multiple star systems and unlikely to pose coordinated resistance for the foreseeable future. The tactical debrief would continue for months as Imperial analysts studied every aspect of the engagement, seeking to understand how an alien mind had achieved such unprecedented coordination among inherently chaotic forces. Most importantly, they would develop new doctrine to counter similar threats should they emerge in the future, ensuring that the Imperium's military superiority could adapt to evolving challenges. Captain Ventress activated his Vox transmitter, establishing contact with the Ultramarine's battle barge in high orbit, where his report would be transmitted to Chapter Command on Waaagh. Strike Force Herakles to Fleet Command. Primary objective achieved. Xenos threat neutralized. Imperial forces have demonstrated once again that faith and discipline triumph over alien cunning. The psychological impact of victory rippled through Imperial forces like a benediction, restoring confidence in doctrines that had been tested to their limits and proven worthy of the trust placed in them. Every guardsman and space marine who had participated in the engagement understood that they had been part of something unprecedented, the defeat of an enemy who had learned to think like humans while retaining all the physical advantages of his brutal species. As the sulfur sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the ash wastes in shades of amber and gold, Imperial forces began the methodical process of securing their victory. Supply lines were re-established, wounded were evacuated to proper medical facilities, and the massive logistical effort of occupying conquered territory began with the efficiency that marked professional military organizations. But even as they celebrated their triumph, every Imperial warrior understood that this victory represented something more significant than the defeat of a single Waaagh. They had proven that human determination, properly directed through superior training and unshakable faith, could overcome any threat the galaxy might produce. The Emperor's wrath had been vindicated, and the Mordian Sector was safe for another generation of faithful service to the Golden Throne. The final reckoning came not with fanfare or triumphant parades, but with the quiet professionalism of Imperial forces conducting post-battle operations across terrain that had been transformed from ash wastes into a graveyard of epic proportions. Across the killing fields of Kalor Prime, recovery teams worked with mechanical precision to catalogue the dead, secure valuable equipment, and ensure that the price of victory was properly recorded in the annals of Imperial military history. Colonel Thorne stood among the ruins of what had been the forward command post, his weathered features reflecting the satisfaction of a professional soldier whose tactical decisions had preserved not merely his regiment, but the entire Mordian Sector from alien conquest. Around him, communications specialists maintained contact with Sector Command, while intelligence officers compiled the after-action reports that would inform Imperial doctrine for generations to come. "Sir," reported Medical Officer Krantz, her augmetic implants interfaced with casualty processing systems that tracked every Imperial life lost in service to the Golden Throne. Final casualty figures show 17,000 killed in action, 31,000 wounded, with projected return-to-duty rates of 87% within 6 months. Considering the magnitude of the threat we faced, losses were acceptable. Acceptable. The word carried weight in Imperial military doctrine, where every human life was precious, but victory against Xenos threats was priceless. Each name on the casualty lists represented families who would mourn, communities that would honor their sacrifice, and a broader Imperium that remained secure because brave men and women had stood firm when darkness threatened to overwhelm the light of human civilization. Captain Ventress conducted his own tactical assessment, reviewing engagement footage captured by helmet-mounted recording devices that would provide training material for future generations of Space Marines. The battle had demonstrated several crucial principles: that alien cunning could never truly match human strategic thinking, that combined arms coordination multiplied effectiveness beyond simple arithmetic, and most importantly, that faith in the Emperor provided strength that transcended mere physical capabilities. "Brother Pausanias," Ventress addressed his old friend as they surveyed the battlefield carnage. "What are your observations regarding Xenos' tactical innovations?" The veteran sergeant considered the question with the analytical mind that marked Ultramarine's thinking. "They learned from us, Captain, but they could not truly understand us. Their coordination was impressive by Ork standards, but it lacked the depth of genuine strategic thinking. When pressed by superior tactics, they reverted to type." The assessment captured something fundamental about the nature of warfare in the 41st millennium. Alien species might achieve temporary tactical advantages through crude mimicry of human methods, but they could never match the combination of intellectual capacity, spiritual strength, and technological sophistication that made Imperial forces supreme across the galaxy. Victory was not merely probable, it was inevitable for those who served the Emperor with proper faith and discipline. Tech-adept Zorian supervised the examination of captured Ork technology, his mechanical servants cataloging innovations that had made Skarjaw's forces so dangerous. "The Xenos demonstrated remarkable adaptability," he reported through Vox channels that crackled with electronic interference. Their modifications to standard Imperial equipment showed genuine understanding of technological principles, though their implementation remained fundamentally crude. The intelligence gathered would prove invaluable for future engagements, providing insights into how alien minds might attempt to counter Imperial advantages while revealing the fundamental weaknesses that made such efforts ultimately futile. No Xenos species possessed the combination of traits that had allowed humanity to dominate the galaxy for 10,000 years of constant warfare. Across the battlefield, Chaplain Mordicus conducted funeral rites for the fallen, his voice carrying prayers that would ensure their souls found rest in the Emperor's light. Each ceremony was attended by survivors, who understood that death in service to the Golden Throne was not defeat, but the ultimate expression of human loyalty to something greater than individual existence. Their sacrifice preserved 17 star systems and 20 billion Imperial citizens. The chaplain intoned, his words carrying across assembled ranks that stood in perfect formation despite exhaustion and grief. Their names will be inscribed in the chapter's rolls of honor, their deeds remembered whenever warriors speak of courage in the face of impossible odds. The logistical aftermath of victory required massive coordination as supply ships arrived to evacuate wounded, transport captured equipment, and begin the process of rebuilding defensive installations that would guard against future threats. Imperial efficiency transformed chaos into order with mechanical precision, demonstrating the administrative capabilities that sustained an empire spanning 1,000,000 worlds. As the first stars became visible in the darkening sky, Colonel Thorne received confirmation of what every Imperial warrior had known in their hearts. The Mordian Sector was secure, the Xenos threat had been neutralized, and humanity's dominance remained unchallenged. Victory had come at a price that would be mourned for generations, but it had come nonetheless. The Emperor's wrath had been made manifest through mortal hands, and the galaxy was reminded once again why humanity deserved its place as the rightful inheritors of the stars. In the grim darkness of the far future, where war was eternal and peace merely the brief pause between conflicts, the faithful had proven themselves worthy of their sacred trust. But the cost would echo through Imperial records as a reminder that even victory against the alien carried a price that no mortal should have to pay. In the aftermath of what Imperial historians would record as the Kalor engagement, the true cost of victory became clear through the cold mathematics of war that measured triumph not in territory gained, but in lives forever changed. The ash wastes of Kalor Prime bore silent witness to 17,000 graves marked with simple Aquila symbols, each representing a son of Mordian who had answered the Emperor's call and paid the ultimate price in service to humanity's survival. Colonel Marcus Thorne stood before the memorial wall that would be erected on the battlefield, reading names that would be carved in blessed stone and remembered until the stars themselves grew cold. Sergeant Major Corvin, who had served 3 decades with distinction. Lieutenant Vega, whose tactical brilliance had saved her entire company. Master Sergeant Kowalski, whose artillery had broken the back of alien resistance. Each name represented not merely a casualty statistic, but a family destroyed, a community diminished, a light extinguished in service to something greater than individual existence. The victory had preserved 20 billion Imperial citizens across 17 star systems, saving them from the green tide that would have consumed entire civilizations in an orgy of mindless destruction. Intelligence analysis confirmed that Skarjaw's Waaagh had represented the greatest Xenos threat to the sector in 3 centuries, its defeat preventing a catastrophe that would have required intervention by entire Space Marine chapters and guard armies numbered in the millions. Yet the price haunted every survivor who had witnessed friends and brothers fall in defense of worlds they would never see, protecting civilians whose names they would never know. The 47th Mordian Iron Guard had been reduced to fewer than 80,000 effectives, their proud colors bearing battle honors purchased with blood that no amount of glory could restore to grieving families. Captain Ventress submitted his final report to Chapter Command, documenting tactical lessons that would influence Space Marine doctrine for centuries to come. The engagement had proven that alien cunning could achieve temporary coordination through mimicry of human methods, but that such efforts remained fundamentally flawed by the inherent limitations of Xenos psychology. More importantly, it had demonstrated that combined operations between Astartes and Guard units could achieve victories impossible for either force alone. the Ultramarines had lost 7 battle brothers, their gene seed recovered, and their names added to the chapter's rolls of honor, alongside 10,000 years of heroic sacrifice. Each fallen warrior represented centuries of training, irreplaceable combat experience, and genetic legacy that could never be truly replaced despite the chapter's recruiting protocols. As transport ships carried the wounded home to Mordian Prime and other worlds across the sector, their hospital bays filled with men who would bear the scars of Kalor Prime for the rest of their lives, the true nature of Imperial victory became clear. This was not the clean triumph celebrated in propaganda broadcasts, but the grinding reality of warfare in the 41st millennium, where every victory carried the seeds of future mourning. The Emperor's light burned eternal across the galaxy, sustained by the sacrifice of mortals who stood firm against darkness, despite knowing the price of their devotion. In the grim reality of humanity's endless war for survival, heroes were not born but forged in the crucible of impossible choices and Pyrrhic victories that preserved civilization one bloody engagement at a time. On Kalor Prime, the wind carried ash across memorials that would stand until the world itself crumbled, bearing witness to the day when Orks faced the Emperor's wrath and learned why humanity had endured 10,000 years of constant warfare. The victory would be remembered, the heroes honored, and the lessons learned. But the cost would echo through eternity as a reminder that even the Emperor's chosen could bleed, and that every triumph against the alien darkness was purchased with humanity's most precious resource, the lives of those willing to stand guard, while others slept safely in their beds. In the darkness between stars, new threats were already stirring, and somewhere in the vastness of space, other worlds waited for their own moment of testing. The Imperium endured because men like Marcus Thorne and Uriel Ventris understood that the price of survival was eternal vigilance, paid in blood by each generation in turn. The Emperor protects, but even his divine wrath required mortal hands to make it manifest in the material realm where heroes died, so that humanity might live another day.